The envelope was still bent from being shoved under my apartment door when my best friend called and said, "Ethan, don't open those files while you're standing up." I remember staring down at the thick brown paper against the scratched hardwood floor, one hand still gripping the strap of my backpack, the other holding a paper cup of coffee I had bought after a 14-hour day split between medical school lectures and my evening shift at an urgent care clinic near SouthPark. It was almost 11 on a Thursday night in Charlotte, and my wife, Madison, had texted me 20 minutes earlier saying she was having wine with her friend Brooke and would probably stay at her place because she felt too tired to drive home. Under any normal circumstances, would have told her to be careful, locked the door, and fallen asleep over my pharmacology notes. But nothing about that night was normal, because the person calling me was my childhood friend Caleb, and Caleb never sounded afraid. "What files?" I asked. There was a pause, followed by the sound of him exhaling through his nose. "The ones in the envelope. Sit down before you look at them. And whatever you do, don't call Madison." I set my coffee on the kitchen counter and lowered myself onto the edge of our gray couch. My legs felt strangely weak even though I still had no idea what I was about to see. Inside the envelope was a flash drive, a stack of printed photographs, and 6 pages of bank transactions highlighted in yellow. The first photograph showed Madison walking into a boutique hotel in Uptown with a man I recognized as Dr. Nolan Reeves, an orthopedic resident at the hospital where I hoped to complete one of my clinical rotations. The second showed Nolan's hand against the small of her back. The third had been taken through the glass of the hotel bar. Madison was leaning across the table, smiling at him in the private way she used to smile at me before exams, before debt, before our marriage became something she seemed to carry around like an inconvenient bag. Then I reached the fourth photograph. They were kissing beside the elevators. Not a nervous first kiss. Not some drunken mistake that had surprised both of them. Her arms were around his neck, and his room key was visible between 2 fingers of the hand resting on her waist. I didn't drop the photograph. I wish I had. Dropping it would have meant my body was still capable of reacting normally. Instead, I held it perfectly still while a pulse began hammering beneath my jaw. My hearing narrowed until the hum of the refrigerator sounded like heavy machinery. The coffee I had swallowed 10 minutes earlier turned sour in my stomach, and sweat collected between my shoulder blades under my blue clinic scrubs. I was 25 years old, halfway through a brutal medical program, working 24 hours a week just to keep us from burning through our savings, and in one frozen moment I understood that the woman sleeping beside me every night had been using the hours I spent trying to build our future to create a second life with someone else. Now, I want you to sit with that detail for a second. She wasn't cheating because I was never home and she felt abandoned, although that was the story she would later try to tell. I was never home because we had agreed that I would finish school while working part-time, and she would cover more of our living expenses until residency. Every extra shift I accepted was something we had discussed at the same kitchen counter where I was now looking at evidence of her betrayal. "How long?" I finally asked. Caleb didn't pretend not to understand. "At least 7 months. 7 months. Madison and I had only been married for 2 years. How did you get this?" I asked. "I saw them 3 weeks ago," he said. "I was meeting a client at the Ivy's hotel. I watched her walk into the elevator with him, and I told myself there had to be an explanation. Then I saw them again last Friday at a restaurant in Noda. She was supposed to be at a girls' night, right?" I looked at Madison's last message. "Wine with Brooke. Too tired to drive." "Right." Caleb explained that his cousin worked as a licensed private investigator. He had paid him to document enough evidence that Madison could not dismiss everything as a misunderstanding. Caleb had wanted to tell me immediately, but he knew I was in the middle of practical exams and feared I would confront her without proof. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I kept hoping I was wrong." I reached the bank statements next. The account numbers belonged to our joint savings account, the one containing what remained of the money my grandfather had left me when he died. It had started with $38,400. Madison and I had agreed that the money would remain untouched except for tuition emergencies or the down payment on a house after residency. Over 7 months, she had transferred $19,650 into an account I did not recognize. Several hotel payments, restaurant charges, and luxury purchases had then been paid from that second account. Nolan had not merely been sleeping with my wife. I had been financing it. My chest tightened so sharply that I thought, with a detached and almost ridiculous sense of irony, that I might need to drive myself back to the urgent care where I had just finished working. I pressed 2 fingers against my wrist and counted my pulse because clinical habits were easier than emotions. 128 beats per minute. I focused on breathing until it dropped below 100. Then the front door lock clicked. I slid the photographs and statements back into the envelope, pushed it beneath the couch, and ended the call without saying goodbye. Madison stepped inside wearing a fitted black dress beneath a beige coat. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was slightly tangled, and the lipstick she had been wearing that morning was gone. "You're still awake," she said, freezing for half a second when she saw me. "Brooke got a migraine, so I came home." There are moments when rage doesn't feel hot. It feels surgical. My mind registered the hotel shampoo in her hair, the small red mark below her collarbone, and the fact that she had removed her wedding ring and slipped it into the outer pocket of her purse. Every fact landed in its own clean compartment. I could have crossed the room, emptied the envelope onto the floor, and demanded to know how she could do this to me. I could have shouted until the neighbors called security. Part of me wanted the immediate relief of destruction. But then I remembered the missing $19,650, and another thought took its place. If I confronted her that night, she would know I had discovered the money. She could drain whatever remained before morning, delete messages, warn Nolan, and begin building a story in which I was the unstable husband. So I looked at her and forced my face into the same exhausted expression I had worn every night that week. "I thought you were staying over," I said. She placed her purse on the chair and avoided my eyes while taking off her coat. "I changed my mind. You know how Brooke gets when she has one of her headaches." "Yeah," I said. "Long day. I'm going to sleep." She walked over and kissed my forehead. I had to lock every muscle in my body to keep from recoiling. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. That almost broke me more than the photographs. If you have ever been lied to by someone who could still touch you gently while doing it, then you already know why. Cruelty is easier to recognize when it looks cruel. Madison's Betrayal wore perfume, used a soft voice, and told me it was proud of me. I lay beside her for the next 5 hours without closing my eyes. She fell asleep in less than 10 minutes, breathing steadily with her back toward me. At 5:20 in the morning, I carried the envelope into the bathroom, locked the door, and connected the flash drive to my laptop. Caleb's investigator had organized everything into folders by date. There were photographs, vehicle records, hotel confirmations, and a timeline documenting 18 meetings between Madison and Nolan. There were also screenshots of public social media posts placing Brooke at several locations with Madison on nights when Madison had later left alone. That meant Brooke knew. The realization was uncomfortable for reasons I didn't want to examine. Brooke had been Madison's closest friend since college, but over the previous year she had also become the person who checked on me when Madison forgot important events, brought me dinner during exam week, and once stayed until 2 in the morning helping me search for a flash drive containing a presentation I thought I had lost. Madison frequently joked that Brooke understood me better than she did. I had always laughed it off because Brooke was my wife's friend, and there were lines a married man did not approach, even in his imagination. Now her name was woven through 7 months of alibis. Whether she had actively helped Madison cheat or had simply looked away, I couldn't tell. Either possibility made me feel sick. At 7, I emailed copies of the evidence to a new encrypted account, uploaded another set to secure cloud storage, and placed the original envelope in Caleb's safe. Then I went to class and spent 90 minutes studying the mechanisms of anticoagulants while my marriage bled out in complete silence. That afternoon, I called a family law attorney named Marissa Cole from a bench outside the medical school library. I told her I needed an emergency consultation involving marital infidelity, missing inherited funds, and possible financial fraud. She asked me not to move money, change locks, or send any message that could be interpreted as threatening. The affair matters emotionally, she said when we met in her office the following morning, but North Carolina law is where this becomes strategically interesting. She explained that North Carolina recognized claims for alienation of affection and criminal conversation under certain circumstances. Proving the marriage had genuine affection before Nolan interfered would matter. So would proving sexual contact. The photographs were strong, but the financial records might be even more important, because inherited money that had remained separate in character could potentially be traced and protected. Potentially? I asked. Marissa folded her hands over the file. The complication is that you placed the inheritance in a joint account. Madison may argue it became marital property. But if she transferred it through deception, forged anything, or used it in anticipation of separation, we have several avenues. I need complete records before she realizes you're looking. I gave her permission to bring in a forensic accountant and retain Caleb's investigator directly. By Monday morning, the first legal steps were moving. Marissa prepared the divorce complaint but did not file it yet. The investigator began verifying Nolan's assets, employment status, and relationship history. The forensic accountant traced Madison's transfers into an online account opened 8 months earlier. Then he found something that changed the case from ugly to dangerous. 3 weeks before the affair appeared to begin, someone had applied for a $42,000 private education loan using my identity, my social security number, and a digital version of my signature. The funds had been deposited into the same joint account, moved within 48 hours, and divided between Madison's hidden account and a limited liability company registered to Nolan. I stared at the documents across Marissa's conference table, unable to understand how a debt that large could exist without appearing in the university payment system. Because it wasn't certified through your school, the accountant said. It appears to be a personal loan marketed as an education product. The application used your enrollment information to support your income projections. Madison had access to all of it, my tax returns, school records, identification, even the password manager we had shared before she suddenly insisted that married couples needed some digital privacy. I had assumed she was protecting harmless conversations with friends. She had actually been protecting a financial crime. Let me pause here, because this was the moment my plan stopped being about catching a cheating wife. An affair could destroy my marriage. $42,000 of fraud could destroy my credit before I became a doctor, compromise housing applications, affect licensing disclosures, and attach itself to my name for years. I no longer wanted an apology. I wanted a documented record proving exactly what she and Nolan had done. For the next 10 days, I became two different people. At home, I was the exhausted husband Madison expected. I studied at the kitchen table, thanked her when she reheated takeout, and pretended not to notice when she disappeared into the bathroom with her phone. Outside the apartment, I met attorneys, signed affidavits, reviewed transaction histories, froze my credit, opened a separate account for my paychecks, and filed an identity theft report under Marissa's supervision. Every ordinary conversation with Madison became evidence of how comfortable she felt. One night she sat across from me eating pad thai and complained that I seemed distracted. "It feels like school gets all of you," she said, pushing noodles around with her fork. "Sometimes I wonder whether there's anything left for this marriage." I almost admired the nerve it took to say that after spending the afternoon at a hotel with Nolan. Instead, I lowered my eyes and said, "I know. After Friday's exam, let's talk about fixing things." Her expression softened immediately. She believed I was afraid of losing her. That belief kept her careless. On Wednesday, Madison told me she and Brooke were planning a weekend trip to Asheville. The investigator already knew she had booked 2 nights at a luxury cabin under Nolan's name. "Brooke's been going through something," Madison said while folding sweaters into a suitcase. "She needs me." "Is she okay?" I asked. "She will be." Madison smiled as if she had just performed an act of friendship. Less than an hour after she left, someone knocked on the apartment door. Brooke stood in the hallway wearing jeans, a rain-darkened green jacket, and an expression so tense that I knew she had not come to borrow anything. "Is Madison here?" she asked. "She left for Asheville with you." Brooke's face lost its color. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Ethan," she said, "I need to tell you something, and after I do, you're probably never going to want to see me again." My attorney had warned me not to reveal the investigation to anyone connected to Madison, but Brooke looked less like an accomplice than someone who had been carrying a weight that had finally become too heavy. I kept my voice neutral. "Tell me." She sat on the edge of the chair where Madison usually left her purse. "I knew about Nolan," she said. "Not from the beginning. I found out 4 months ago. Madison made me swear I wouldn't tell you, and I told myself it wasn't my marriage, that she would end it, that getting involved would only make everything worse." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "That was cowardly, and I'm sorry. But 2 weeks ago, she asked me to lie about Asheville. I refused. She used my name anyway. I felt anger rise, but it was controlled now, sharpened by days of preparation. Why come here tonight?" Brooke opened her bag and removed a tablet. "Because the affair isn't the worst thing she did." She entered a password, opened a folder, and turned the screen toward me. There were dozens of screenshots from a private conversation between Madison and Nolan. Brooke must have photographed them directly from Madison's laptop. One message read, "Once the loan mess is settled and Ethan signs the post-nup, we can move the rest without him contesting it." Another said, "He trusts me completely. I can make him think the post-nup protects him because of my income." Then I reached a message from Nolan that made the room feel suddenly airless. "Make sure he completes the hospital rotation application first. If he causes trouble afterward, I know exactly who reviews it." I looked up at Brooke. "He was planning to interfere with my career?" "Yes," she said. "And Madison knew." Then she swiped to one final screenshot, this one showing a draft email written from an account using my name. The message accused one of my professors of accepting money to alter exam scores. It had not been sent yet, but it was scheduled to go out automatically the following Monday morning. If it reached the university from an account linked to me, the resulting investigation could end my medical career before it truly began. Brooke's voice shook when she said, "They're leaving the cabin tomorrow afternoon. Madison thinks you're still working Saturday. Nolan is going to be at your apartment with her because they need access to your laptop. Whatever you're planning, Ethan, you have less than 24 hours." I picked up my phone and called Marissa. Until that moment, we had been preparing a divorce. Now we were preparing a trap. Marissa answered on the second ring, and when I told her about the scheduled email, her voice changed from controlled concern to absolute command. "Disconnect your laptop from the internet, photograph the screen exactly as Brooke showed it to you, and do not touch the message itself. I'm calling the investigator and a digital forensics specialist. Nobody enters that apartment tomorrow until we control what they can access." Brooke sat motionless while I followed those instructions. She watched me unplug the router, disable the wireless connection, and photograph every visible detail on her tablet. Then Marissa asked to speak with her. Brooke agreed to provide a formal statement, surrender the screenshots for forensic verification, and explain when and how she had obtained them. Before ending the call, Marissa said, "Ethan, you need to leave tonight. If Madison and Nolan expect an empty apartment, we should give them one. But you will not be inside when they arrive." 20 minutes later, Caleb pulled into the parking lot in his black Tacoma. I packed my identification, school records, 2 changes of clothes, and the old silver watch my grandfather had given me. Everything else stayed exactly where it was. Brooke helped me photograph each room so Madison could not later claim I had damaged or removed marital property. She moved quietly through the apartment, avoiding my eyes until we reached the bedroom. Our wedding photograph stood on Madison's nightstand. Brooke stared at it for several seconds and said, "I should have told you 4 months ago." "Yes," I replied. It was blunt, but I didn't have enough energy left to protect her from the truth. "You should have." She nodded as though she had expected something worse. I kept thinking loyalty meant keeping her secret. "I understand now that I was only helping her hurt you." I zipped my backpack and lifted it from the bed. "Why did you finally choose me?" Brooke's expression tightened. "Because I saw the email, and because she laughed when Nolan said ruining your rotation would make you easier to control during the divorce." I realized I wasn't protecting my friend anymore. I was protecting someone I didn't recognize. There was history between Brooke and me that neither of us had ever named. She had always noticed when I was exhausted, remembered the dates of my exams, and treated my ambitions as something worth respecting. But she was still Madison's closest friend, and I was still a married man standing in the wreckage of his marriage. Whatever complicated current existed beneath that moment, I refused to touch it. I thanked her for the evidence, told her Marissa would contact her, and left with Caleb. If you're wondering whether part of me wanted comfort from the one person who seemed to understand what Madison had done, the answer is yes. But wanting something and choosing it are different acts. I would not let betrayal turn me into the kind of man who crossed boundaries simply because he was hurting. Caleb's cousin, the investigator, installed 2 legally approved security cameras covering the apartment's entryway and main living area. The lease listed both Madison and me as occupants, and the devices recorded only common spaces, but Marissa was meticulous about the limits. There would be no camera in the bedroom, no audio interception of private calls, and no improvising because we felt morally justified. A digital forensics specialist named Priya Shah created a verified image of my laptop's drive, documented the fraudulent email draft, and replaced the machine on my desk exactly as we had found it. She then configured alerts that would record login attempts and changes to files without allowing the scheduled message to leave the device. By 2 in the morning, I was lying on Caleb's guest room mattress, staring at the ceiling with my phone on my chest. Madison texted at 2:17. "Asheville is beautiful. Wish you were here." She attached a photograph of herself standing beside a stone fireplace, wearing the green sweater I had bought her for Christmas. The right edge of Nolan's shoulder was visible in a mirror behind her. I typed, "Wish I was there too. Have fun with Brooke." She responded with a red heart. That heart became one of the strangest details of the entire ordeal. It was so small and effortless, one little symbol sent by a woman who believed she was about to steal my money, compromise my degree, and blame me for the collapse. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Marissa. Saturday arrived under a low gray sky. At 11:46 in the morning, the parking lot camera captured Madison's SUV pulling into its usual space. Nolan's silver Mercedes parked 2 rows away. Madison entered first, carrying her suitcase and glancing down the hallway before unlocking the door. Nolan followed 20 seconds later with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Caleb and I watched the live video from the investigator's office 3 miles away. My hands remained flat on the table because I did not trust myself to hold anything. Madison walked directly to my desk. She opened the laptop, entered a password, and frowned when it failed. Nolan leaned over her shoulder. The camera had no usable audio from that distance, but their expressions told the story clearly enough. Madison tried another password. Then she retrieved a small notebook from the kitchen drawer, flipped through it, and typed again. This time the screen unlocked. Priya's monitoring software immediately recorded the access. Madison navigated through my email accounts while Nolan connected a flash drive. He appeared relaxed, almost bored, as if sabotaging another man's career were an administrative task he wanted to finish before lunch. A few minutes later, Priya pointed at her screen. "They've opened the draft. He's modifying the metadata." Nolan moved the scheduled delivery time forward. Instead of Monday morning, the email would now be sent in 12 minutes. Priya blocked transmission at the server level while preserving every action in the forensic log. Then Nolan opened a folder containing scanned copies of my identification and selected several files. "He's copying them," Priya said. Marissa, seated beside me, made one call. Two Charlotte Mecklenburg police detectives who had already reviewed the identity theft report entered the building with the property manager. This wasn't some dramatic television raid with officers kicking in the door. The detectives knocked, announced themselves, and waited while Madison panicked inside. On camera, she closed the laptop and shoved Nolan's flash drive into her sweater pocket. Nolan walked toward the bedroom, then apparently reconsidered when the detectives announced that the property manager was present with a key. Madison opened the door wearing a smile so artificial it barely resembled her face. We could not hear every word, but the investigator's hallway microphone captured enough. "Is something wrong?" she asked. One detective explained that they were investigating unauthorized access to electronic accounts and a fraudulent loan associated with the residence. Nolan immediately said, "I'm just a guest." Madison turned toward him so sharply that her hair swung across her face. The detectives separated them. Nolan was escorted into the hallway while Madison remained near the kitchen. When an officer asked whether she had accessed my computer, she said, "My husband and I share everything." Then Priya remotely displayed a notification on the laptop screen, "Unauthorized session documented. Do not alter this device." Madison saw it. Her entire posture changed. Her shoulders dropped, her mouth opened, and for the first time since I had discovered the affair, she understood that I was ahead of her. My phone began ringing 30 seconds later. I let it vibrate against the table. She called again. Then she sent, "Ethan, call me right now. This is not what it looks like." The investigator snorted softly, but I felt no satisfaction yet. The trap had worked, but watching my wife lie to detectives inside the apartment we had built together did not feel like victory. It felt like standing outside a burning house and realizing that even if the fire department saved the structure, I would never call it home again. The detective seized Nolan's flash drive with his consent after informing him they could seek a warrant. They did not arrest either of them that afternoon. The evidence required formal review. The loan company had not yet completed its fraud investigation, and Marissa warned me that criminal cases moved according to proof, not emotion. But the intervention prevented the email from being sent and preserved a clear record of what they had attempted. More importantly, Nolan made his first mistake after leaving the building. He called the hospital's associate program director and claimed he had visited my apartment because I was selling prescription medication to other students. The call was recorded under hospital compliance procedures. He apparently believed accusing me first would protect him. Instead, it widened the investigation. By 4 o'clock, the hospital placed him on administrative leave pending review of potential professional misconduct, retaliation, and misuse of his position. Marissa filed my divorce complaint at 4:12. Madison was formally served at 5:03 in the parking lot outside the apartment. Nolan had already left without her. The process server handed her the documents while she stood beside her suitcase, staring at the locked front door. On Marissa's advice, I had not changed the locks, but the property manager had temporarily restricted access to preserve the computer and other potential evidence until the detectives completed their work. Madison called me 11 times. Her messages moved through predictable stages. First came outrage, "How could you send police to our home?" Then denial, "Nolan was helping me fix something on your laptop." Then affection, "Please, baby, we can explain everything if you come home." Finally, fear, "You cannot accuse me of fraud. That loan was for both of us." I replied only once, all future communication must go through my attorney. Now I want you to imagine how difficult that sentence was to send. It looks powerful when written down, but my thumb hovered above the screen for almost a minute. This was the woman whose hand I had held during her father's surgery, whose name I had written beside mine on every version of the future. Some part of me still wanted her to say one impossible sentence that would make the evidence disappear. She never did. Instead, she hired an attorney using money from the hidden account and claimed the transfers had been authorized household spending. Her answer to the divorce complaint accused me of emotional neglect, financial control, and weaponizing law enforcement to punish a loyal spouse for maintaining a professional friendship. She denied adultery. She also claimed Brooke had fabricated the screenshots because Brooke was obsessed with me and wanted to destroy our marriage. That accusation ignited the taboo tension Madison had spent years pretending was a joke. According to Madison's filing, Brooke had pursued me emotionally, encouraged me to distrust my wife, and manipulated Caleb into arranging surveillance. None of it was true, but it was clever enough to create doubt. Madison attached old messages in which Brooke had reminded me to eat during exam week, congratulated me after passing anatomy, and once told me, "You deserve someone who sees how hard you work." Removed from context, they looked intimate. Madison's attorney argued that I had been conducting an emotional affair with her best friend and had manufactured the case to escape the marriage without financial consequences. Brooke called me in tears after reading the filing. "She's going to make everyone think I did this because I wanted you." I was standing outside the medical library, watching students pass with coffee cups and backpacks, living ordinary lives I suddenly envied. "Did you?" I asked. Silence answered before she did. "I never acted on anything," she whispered. "I never asked you for anything. But I would be lying if I said I felt nothing." I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth Madison had twisted into a weapon. Brooke had feelings for me, perhaps for longer than I knew. I also could not deny that her kindness had mattered to me during months when my own wife treated my presence like background noise. But nothing had happened between us. No affair. No secret meetings. No kiss. Not even a conversation that crossed the line. "Then we tell the truth," I said. "All of it. You had feelings you never acted on, and when you learned Madison was trying to destroy my career, you gave me the evidence." Brooke released an unsteady breath. "And after this?" "After this, I need to rebuild my life without using you to get revenge on her." That hurt her. I could hear it in the pause. But she said she understood. Brooke signed an affidavit detailing her feelings, her silence, and the exact moment she chose to intervene. Marissa believed honesty made her more credible, not less. A liar would have denied every uncomfortable fact. Brooke admitted the part that embarrassed her while maintaining the line she had never crossed. Madison, meanwhile, kept changing her version of events. She first said she had never been to Asheville. When cabin security footage surfaced, she claimed Nolan had surprised her there. When the reservation showed that she had emailed him the booking confirmation, she said the trip was innocent. When the investigator produced photographs of them kissing outside the cabin, her attorney stopped discussing the affair entirely and focused on the money. The forensic accountant then found the detail that broke their financial defense. Nolan's limited liability company had used $28,000 from the fraudulent loan as part of a deposit on a medical aesthetics clinic he planned to open after residency. Madison was listed in internal documents as operations director with a promised 20% ownership share. They had not stolen the money impulsively. They were building a business together and planning to leave me responsible for the debt. The remaining funds had paid for hotels, jewelry, the Asheville cabin, and a $4,600 watch Madison had given Nolan on his birthday. She had told me that month we could not afford to replace my cracked phone screen. Let me pause here, because people sometimes imagine revenge as one explosive moment. Mine was a sequence of signed documents, frozen accounts, certified records, and quiet rooms where lies were compared against timestamps. There was no need for me to scream. Every time Madison changed her story, another document contradicted her. The loan company removed the disputed debt from my active credit report while investigating. Marissa obtained a temporary order preventing Madison from transferring or spending the remaining hidden funds. We filed claims seeking the return of my traceable inheritance, compensation related to the fraud, and damages against Nolan under North Carolina's civil laws involving marital interference. The hospital's internal investigation also discovered that Nolan had accessed my preliminary rotation application without authorization. He had added a private note describing me as emotionally volatile and potentially unsuitable for high-pressure clinical environments. Access logs showed the note had been entered 2 days after Madison told him I was becoming suspicious. Nolan was suspended from all patient contact. Then my own family learned what had happened. I had kept the situation from them because I didn't want my mother worrying or my younger sister hearing distorted rumors online. Madison solved that problem by calling my mother first. She claimed I was having an affair with Brooke and using rich lawyers to leave her homeless. My mother listened without interrupting, then called me and asked one question: "Do you have proof?" I sent her the photographs, the loan documents, and Nolan's messages about my career. She did not call Madison back. My father, who had always liked Madison and once defended her when I complained about her spending, drove 3 hours from Raleigh that same evening. He arrived at Caleb's house carrying a duffel bag and the wooden box containing my grandfather's original will. "Your inheritance was meant to put you through medicine," he said. "Your grandfather worked 36 years for that money. Nobody gets to steal it and call it marital property." He offered to pay Marissa's retainer and stay through the first court hearing. But the person who surprised me most was Madison's older brother, Grant. He called from Atlanta 2 days later. Grant had never been especially warm toward me. He thought I studied too much, worked too little, and depended on Madison while chasing an expensive dream. I expected him to threaten me. Instead, he said, "My sister told our parents you invented the affair. Nolan called me this morning and asked me to convince her to withdraw money before the court freezes it." I recorded the call. I sat upright on Caleb's couch. "Why would you help me?" Grant's answer came slowly. "Because she did something similar to our cousin 5 years ago. Not the affair, the money. She used his identity to open 2 credit cards and our parents paid them off quietly. They made us promise never to tell you." The room seemed to contract around me. Madison's financial betrayal had not begun with Nolan. Her family had hidden a pattern from me before our wedding. Grant apologized for staying silent and sent the recording directly to Marissa. Nolan could be heard advising him to tell Madison to move the remaining funds into cryptocurrency and claim they had been spent before the temporary order. That recording transformed Grant from a reluctant relative into a witness. It also gave Marissa grounds to request an emergency hearing. 3 mornings later, Madison entered a Mecklenburg County courtroom wearing a navy dress, pearl earrings, and the same wounded expression she had used whenever she wanted someone to believe life was happening to her. Nolan sat 2 rows behind her with his attorney. My father occupied the seat beside me. Brooke waited outside because she might be called as a witness. Marissa arranged the exhibits in perfect order: the fraudulent application, the transfer records, the clinic documents, the scheduled email, the laptop access logs, the cabin photographs, and Grant's recording. Madison looked at me only once. There was no apology in her face. There was calculation. Before the judge entered, she leaned toward her attorney and whispered something. He frowned, asked her to repeat it, and then looked directly at me. A court officer called everyone to rise. The emergency hearing began, and within 20 minutes Madison's carefully constructed defense started coming apart. She admitted signing my name on the loan application but insisted I had given verbal permission. Marissa asked why the money had been routed to Nolan's company instead of my university. Madison said it was an investment we had discussed. Marissa displayed 11 months of text messages between us containing no mention of Nolan's clinic. Then she displayed Madison's message to Nolan, "Ethan will never know until we're gone." Madison's attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. Nolan's lawyer objected when Marissa introduced Grant's recording, but after a lengthy argument, the judge allowed a limited portion to be considered for the emergency financial order. The courtroom became so quiet that I could hear Madison's bracelet tapping against the table as her hand trembled. Grant's recorded voice asked Nolan, "You want me to help her hide court-restricted money?" Nolan answered, "I'm asking you to protect your sister before Ethan's people take everything." Then Grant said, "And the loan?" Nolan replied, "That debt dies with his career if he can't repay it. Madison won't be attached once the separation paperwork is fixed." Nolan stood up before his attorney could stop him. That recording was manipulated. The judge ordered him to sit down. He refused for half a second too long, and the deputy stepped closer. That single flash of arrogance damaged him more than any speech I could have delivered. The judge froze the clinic company's relevant assets, prohibited Madison and Nolan from transferring disputed funds, ordered preservation of all electronic records, and granted me temporary exclusive use of the apartment after the police released it. Madison was required to surrender financial passwords and devices connected to the accounts. The order was not the final judgment, but it removed their ability to move the money while the civil and criminal investigations continued. Outside the courtroom, reporters from a local legal publication approached Nolan because lawsuits involving medical professionals and alienation of affection claims attracted attention in North Carolina. His attorney pushed him toward the elevator. Madison remained near the courtroom doors, alone except for Grant. She turned to him and said, "You betrayed your own sister." Grant looked at her for a long time. "No," he replied. "I finally stopped helping you betray everyone else." Then he walked past her and shook my father's hand. That was the family twist Madison never anticipated. The brother she believed would protect her had become the witness who prevented her from hiding the last of my money. I thought the hearing would be the lowest point of her day. I was wrong. As we reached the courthouse steps, Marissa received an email from the forensic accountant. She read it twice, then handed me her phone. A second account had been discovered under Madison's name. It contained more than $73,000 transferred from Nolan's clinic investors, along with a spreadsheet assigning percentages to Madison, Nolan, and a third person identified only by the initials G.R. Nolan had not merely used my stolen loan to fund their future. He and Madison appeared to have diverted money from other investors as well. The spreadsheet showed an upcoming transfer scheduled for that evening, despite the court's freeze order. If the initials belonged to the person Marissa suspected, the case was about to become much larger than my divorce. She looked at me and said, "Do not go home yet. We need to find out who G.R. is before Madison realizes we found this account." Across the courthouse plaza, Madison was already typing rapidly on her phone. Then Grant's device rang. He looked at the caller's name, and every trace of color left his face. "It's our father," he said. "His full name is Gregory Reynolds." Grant stared at the ringing phone as though it were an explosive device someone had placed in his palm. He let it ring twice more before Marissa quietly said, "Answer it, but don't accuse him of anything. Put it on speaker only if he consents." Grant swallowed and accepted the call. "Dad?" Gregory Reynolds did not bother with a greeting. His voice came through fast and strained. "Where is your sister?" Grant looked toward the far end of the courthouse plaza, where Madison had disappeared behind a row of parked cars. "She just left the hearing." "Why?" "I need you to find her before she does something stupid. She called your mother and said Ethan's lawyer discovered an account that was supposed to stay private." Marissa raised one finger, warning us to remain silent. Grant asked, "What account?" Gregory hesitated. "This is a family matter. Madison made it Ethan's matter when she stole his identity." "You don't understand what's happening," Gregory snapped. That clinic was supposed to solve everything. Madison made promises to people, Nolan mishandled some paperwork, and now Ethan is trying to turn a marital disagreement into a criminal case. Hearing him reduce forged loan documents and career sabotage to a marital disagreement clarified something for me. Madison had not invented her sense of entitlement alone. It had been cultivated in a family where consequences were treated like misunderstandings and victims were expected to stay quiet for the sake of peace. Grant glanced at Marissa, who wrote a question on the back of a legal folder and held it up. Grant read it aloud. "Dad, are you Gr. on the clinic spreadsheet?" The line went silent. Not disconnected. Silent. We could hear Gregory breathing. Then he said, "Who showed you that?" It was not a confession, but it was close enough to make Marissa's expression sharpen. Grant asked again, and Gregory finally admitted he had invested money in Nolan's medical aesthetics company. He insisted that he knew nothing about my fraudulent loan and believed Madison's contribution had come from marital savings. When Grant asked about the $73,000 account, Gregory became defensive. He said the money belonged to private investors who wanted to avoid unnecessary tax complications until the clinic opened. That phrase caused Marissa to stop taking notes and call someone from her office on a second phone. Gregory then warned Grant not to cooperate further. "Your sister is already losing her marriage," he said. "Do you want her to lose her future too?" Grant's face hardened. Ethan almost lost his future, and she was fine with that. Gregory called him ungrateful and ended the conversation. Grant lowered the phone. For several seconds, the four of us stood beneath the courthouse awning while rain began tapping against the concrete. My father placed a hand on Grant's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but Grant's eyes immediately filled. He turned away before anyone could comment. If you've ever watched someone realize that doing the right thing may cost them their family, then you know there is nothing triumphant about that moment. Grant had taken my side, but it didn't feel like choosing one team over another. It felt like cutting himself free from a machine that had been teaching him to confuse silence with loyalty. Marissa forwarded the spreadsheet and supporting records to the financial crimes detective handling my identity theft report. The scheduled transfer was blocked before it left the account. By that evening, investigators had identified 4 clinic investors who had been told their money was sitting in a regulated escrow account. It wasn't. Madison, Nolan, and Gregory had been shifting portions between personal accounts, paying preliminary business expenses, and covering earlier withdrawals with new investor deposits. Gregory's name appeared beside an 11% management fee even though he held no financial license and performed no documented services for the company. The pattern looked less like a disorganized startup and more like the beginning of a fraud scheme. Madison called Grant 14 times that night. When he finally answered with Marissa present, she alternated between begging and threatening. She said their father could go to prison because of him. Grant reminded her that their father's own transactions had created that risk. Then Madison said the sentence that ended whatever remained of their relationship: "You were supposed to protect us from Ethan." Grant replied, "You needed protection from your own choices, and none of us gave you that soon enough." He blocked her number after the call. The following week became a blur of interviews, affidavits, medical school meetings, and court filings. I voluntarily gave the university's integrity office access to every relevant device and account. Priya demonstrated that the defamatory email had been created from Madison's hidden account, copied onto my laptop during an unauthorized session, and modified by Nolan minutes before police arrived. The investigators also confirmed that I had never accessed the draft before Brooke showed it to me. My professor was informed privately, and the rotation committee removed Nolan's false note from my application. The associate dean, Dr. Helen Carver, sat across from me in a windowless conference room and said, "You should never have been forced to defend yourself against this, but the way you documented everything made the facts unusually clear." I asked the only question that mattered to me. "Will this affect my standing in the program?" "Not negatively," she said. "In fact, The hospital wants to discuss a protected research placement with you while its investigation continues. I had spent weeks fearing that Madison and Nolan had poisoned my future. Instead, their failed attempt placed my application before senior people who might never otherwise have noticed a 25-year-old student working part-time to remain afloat. I did not celebrate yet. I simply went to the restroom, locked myself inside a stall, and allowed my hands to shake for the first time since Caleb had delivered the envelope. Until then, I had been moving from one emergency to another. Dr. Carver's words told my body that survival might actually be possible. Madison's position deteriorated faster. The loan company completed its investigation and formally classified the application as identity theft. The disputed $42,000 balance was removed from my name, and the lender provided its records to law enforcement. The forensic accountant traced $18,900 of my inheritance directly into Madison's hidden account and another $750 into the deposit for Nolan's clinic. With the court order already in place, Marissa negotiated the return of the traceable funds plus my portion of the remaining joint savings. Madison tried to argue that she had spent the inheritance on household needs, but the transaction records showed hotel suites, Nolan's watch, cabin rentals, and restaurant charges made while I was working. The numbers told the truth without raising their voice. Nolan's hospital disciplinary hearing was worse for him than the courtroom had been. He admitted accessing my rotation application but claimed he was evaluating me informally. The hospital demonstrated that he had no assigned role in reviewing my file. He denied writing the emotionally volatile comment until the electronic audit connected the entry to his employee credentials and workstation. Then the investigators played a recording of his call accusing me of selling prescription medication. He could provide no evidence, no witness, and no explanation for why he had waited until police confronted him at my apartment. He was terminated for professional misconduct and unauthorized access before the state medical board even completed its separate review. The clinic investors withdrew their support within 48 hours. Nolan's planned business collapsed before the first treatment room had been painted. He sold the Mercedes, moved out of his luxury apartment, and retained two different attorneys, one for the civil claims and another for the expanding financial investigation. Madison believed he would stand beside her because they had built everything together. Instead, he blamed her. Through discovery, we obtained messages in which Nolan told his attorney that Madison had designed the loan application and had assured him I would never challenge it. Madison responded by turning over voice notes proving Nolan had selected the lender, calculated how much my projected physician income could support, and instructed her where to place my digital signature. Their affair survived secrecy, stolen money, and months of lies. It did not survive accountability. They began destroying each other before our divorce was even final. Now, I want you to notice something about that, because it changed the way I understood revenge. I never needed to turn Madison and Nolan against each other. I only needed to remove the lies that had protected them. Once both of them had to tell the truth under oath, their relationship did the rest. People who build intimacy through deception eventually discover that they cannot trust each other either. Gregory tried to distance himself from the clinic accounts, claiming he had relied entirely on Madison's explanations. But Grant produced old family emails showing that Gregory had arranged payment of Madison's fraudulent credit card debt 5 years earlier and instructed everyone involved not to create a police report. Those emails did not prove he knew about my loan, but they destroyed his claim that he had no reason to question where Madison obtained large sums of money. Faced with investor lawsuits and potential criminal exposure, Gregory agreed to cooperate. He surrendered financial records, repaid the management fees he had received, and admitted that the family had concealed Madison's earlier identity theft before our marriage. Madison's mother stopped speaking to Grant for several months. Grant told me it hurt, but he refused to retract anything. He moved out of the condominium his parents owned, accepted a new position in Charlotte, and started seeing a counselor. We never became best friends, but we developed something quieter and perhaps more meaningful, mutual respect between two men who had finally stopped allowing the same person to manipulate them. Brooke remained involved long enough to authenticate her evidence and testify in a deposition. Madison's attorney asked whether she had ever loved me. Brooke looked directly at him and said, "I cared about Ethan, and I was ashamed of that because he was married to my friend. That is why I kept my distance. Madison's affair did not give me permission to become like her." When the attorney suggested she had helped create the trap to win me for herself, Brooke answered, "I helped because Madison and Nolan intended to frame an innocent person and destroy his career. If Ethan never speaks to me again, I will still know telling the truth was the right decision." Marissa later said it was the strongest answer Brooke could have given because it was not polished. It was simply true. After the deposition, Brooke and I met at a coffee shop in Dilworth. We sat near the window while traffic moved through the rain outside. She asked whether there was any possibility for us once the divorce ended. I could have given her a hopeful answer and kept her waiting. A smaller, angrier version of me might even have dated her just to make Madison furious. But Brooke deserved more than being cast as the final scene of someone else's revenge. "I care about you," I said, "but right now I don't know whether those feelings belong to us or to the worst period of my life. I need to finish this without turning you into an escape route." She looked disappointed, but not surprised. "That's probably the answer I expected. I'm not asking you to wait." "Good," she said with a faint smile. "Because I won't." We hugged outside the coffee shop and walked in opposite directions. There was no secret relationship, no forbidden night together, and no pregnancy used as a final twist. Brooke had been Madison's friend, then my witness, and finally someone who forced me to confront the difference between genuine care and desperate attachment. We exchanged occasional messages afterward, but my ending did not depend on replacing one woman with another. 11 months after Caleb pushed that envelope under my door, the divorce was finalized. Madison agreed to a settlement that returned the full traceable amount of my inheritance, reimbursed a substantial portion of my legal and forensic expenses, surrendered her claim to the remaining joint savings, and waived any request for spousal support. The settlement did not erase the betrayal, but it stopped her from profiting from it. My civil claim against Nolan ended separately. His insurer refused to cover intentional misconduct, so he negotiated a payment secured against the sale of his remaining investments. The amount was less dramatic than headlines make these cases sound, but after fees and taxes, it covered the rest of my tuition and left enough for an emergency fund. For the first time since entering medical school, I was not calculating whether one broken appliance could force me to drop a course. The criminal side moved more slowly. Madison ultimately pleaded guilty to financial identity fraud and received supervised probation, restitution requirements, community service, and a suspended sentence conditioned on compliance. Nolan accepted responsibility for his role in the fraudulent application and unlawful computer access as part of a separate agreement. His medical license was suspended, and reinstatement would require an extensive board review. Gregory avoided a criminal charge related to my loan because investigators could not prove he knew its source, but he settled with the clinic investors and lost most of the money he had put into the project. Their consequences were not cinematic. Nobody was dragged away screaming. Their lives narrowed through court dates, professional restrictions, damaged credit, legal bills, and the exhausting requirement to explain documented choices they could no longer deny. That was enough for me. My real victory came elsewhere. Dr. Carver helped me secure the research placement she had mentioned, focusing on patient safety and the effects of fraudulent documentation inside clinical systems. I worked with a team that developed a verification procedure for sensitive comments added to student and resident evaluations. The project started because Nolan had abused the system, but it eventually became something useful enough to protect other people. Our findings were presented at a regional medical education conference, and I was invited to speak about the technical safeguards without disclosing the private details of my case. By graduation, I had co-authored a paper, earned a competitive residency interview, and saved enough for my restored inheritance and civil settlement to leave the urgent care job during my final semester. I matched into an internal medicine residency in Charlotte. On match day, Caleb stood beside my father and cheered so loudly that several families turned to stare. Grant came too. My mother cried before I even opened the envelope. I moved into a modest townhouse with a narrow balcony overlooking a line of oak trees. It was not the expensive house Madison and I once imagined buying, but every payment came from an account only I controlled, and every room felt peaceful. I placed my grandfather's silver watch on a shelf above my desk beside my residency letter. Those two objects represented the life Madison had tried to take from me, the money my grandfather had earned and the career I had earned for myself. Both were still mine. 2 years later, I completed my first major rotation with outstanding evaluations and was selected for a hospital quality improvement fellowship that came with a salary increase and partial repayment of my remaining legitimate student debt. I also began helping medical students who faced identity theft, coercive relationships, or false professional allegations. I never gave them legal advice. I taught them what I had learned about documentation, independent accounts, and asking for help before shame isolated them. Financially, I ended up more secure than I had been before the affair. Professionally, I found a direction I might never have discovered without the attempt to sabotage me. Personally, I became much harder to deceive, not because I distrusted everyone, but because I finally understood that love without boundaries is not devotion. It is access. Madison had mistaken my trust for permission to use my identity, my labor, and my future. I would never make that mistake again. The last time I saw her was outside a restitution hearing. She looked older, though only 3 years had passed. Nolan was no longer in her life. Brooke had moved to Richmond for work. Grant still spoke to Madison occasionally but refused to give her money or lie for her. Madison approached me beside the courthouse elevator and said, "Was destroying all of us worth it?" A few years earlier, that question might have filled me with guilt. This time, I felt only clarity. "I didn't destroy you," I said. "I stopped letting you use me to hold everything together." The elevator arrived. I stepped inside, and she remained in the hallway. The doors closed without a dramatic final speech. That was the end of us. So if you take anything from what happened to me, let it be these 5 things. 1. When Caleb gave me evidence instead of rumors, he gave me the chance to act intelligently. If you discover betrayal, preserve what is real before confronting someone who has already shown a willingness to lie. 2. Restraint is not weakness. The night Madison came home from Nolan's hotel, staying quiet protected my money, my medical career, and the evidence that eventually cleared my name. 3. Loyalty never requires helping someone harm another person. Brooke and Grant both learned that silence was not neutrality. Once they told the truth, the entire scheme began collapsing. 4. Do not commit your own wrongdoing just because you were wronged. I could have used Brooke as revenge, threatened Nolan, or emptied every account. Choosing legal boundaries made my case stronger and allowed me to recognize myself afterward. 5. The best victory is not watching someone else lose. It is reaching the point where their collapse no longer defines your life. My restored finances mattered, but becoming a doctor and protecting other students meant more. Now I want to know what you would have done at the first real choice point. Comment 1 if you would have stayed quiet and built the legal case like I did, comment 2 if you would have confronted Madison the night you saw the photographs, or comment 3 if Grant's decision to testify against his own family was the moment that changed your opinion of him. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I'm always amazed by how far stories like this travel. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and rebuilding a life on your own terms. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional patterns, fully rewritten in Charlotte to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or actual events is entirely coincidental.